and welcome to the May 21st edition of the Bubb Report. I am Rion Charles. This week on our program, we turn our attention to developments on the Caribbean Secondary Examination Certificate, which is now being administered in all territories governed by the Caribbean Examinations Council. Last week, at least one anonymous educator in Jamaica claimed that the Caribbean Examinations Council's math script was leaked hours before students were scheduled to sit the exam on Wednesday morning in Kingston and other territories. Speaking anonymously, the instructor at the Kingston-based school says he and his colleagues received exam papers pre-drawn. He described the incident as highly irregular and a clear breach of CXC protocol. Students from the institution allegedly received the math paper from colleagues in Guyana via messaging app WhatsApp as early as 7 a.m. exam day. Several learners confirmed that the exam script they received at dawn was indeed the paper administered during the official examination, further corroborating the instructor's initial claim.
Any breach of the security of our examinations and its impact on the integrity of our processes would be of great concern to us, and we would have taken those breaches and leaks seriously. Hence, we would have acted with the kind of urgency that is needed with this particular situation. We would have been enhancing our security provision over the years, and we would have been executing on some of those by conducting audits of our regional apparatus within member states to ensure that the requisite mechanisms and systems are in place. We would have updated our protocol with certain things. We would have rethink our custody management protocol. So all those would have been in place. But one of the things you will have to also appreciate that with the greatest of system that you have in place, it is still dependent on humans executing and the integrity of those persons who are entrusted with the system or who would have access.
In a statement released before holding a press conference, CXC said, quote, "This matter is of great concern to us. We have commenced our investigations and will make a definitive statement once the investigation is completed. In the meantime, candidates can rest assured that this matter is being treated with the highest urgency." Unquote.
As I'm saying to you, we have not ruled out any possibility of any particular option available to us. We, as I said, we are taking this in stages, and we have already communicate with the local authorities there with respect to the Ministry of Education, and we will work with them as we seek to bring closure to this particular episode. But CXC has not at this moment called in any security police apparatus to assist.
Also on the report, we hear why environmentalists in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are raising the alarm about the dredging of 1.2 million cubic meters of sand for the construction of a new port in Kingstown. The Ralph Gonsalves administration said in a statement in April that dredging is expected to take place some 750 meters from the shoreline without any negative impact on coastal wave action. The port modernization project is the second largest capital project in this country's history. It is being done at a cost of EC $620 million. And finally, on the report, you will hear from the Grenada National Reparations Committee about its upcoming annual lecture titled Republicanism in the Age of Reparations. On the heels of the coronation of a new head of state for Britain and Grenada, we assess how the coronation of the new king will affect the island's reparations struggle. We welcome our guests, Arlie Gill, chairman of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, Dr. Andrew Simmons, environmental activist, Joshua Andel, Grenada's CARICOM Youth Ambassador, and Dominic Jeremiah, member of the CXC Council. Here now is our host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, with this week's editorial titled Questioning the Demolition of the Town Hall Building in the Town of St. George. We thank you for joining us.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we're happy that you can join us for this week's episode of the Bubb Report. Let me thank my guest co-host last week, Mr. Curlin Campbell, for sitting in the chair with me as I was battling some illness, and so he was very gracious enough to carry the torch of the Bubb Report last week. So we thank him, and I also want to thank the producers who ensured that the program went off without a hitch last week as well during my absence. And to those of you who called and sent messages of well wishes, I also thank you. Now, last week saw the destruction of another piece of Grenadian history in the town of St. George. The town hall building, which overlooked the market square, has a storied place in Grenadian history. The building housed the office of the first mayor of the town of St. George, who was Fisher Jericho Archibald, during the era of local government in the town. It also served as a site for early town hall meetings of the city, as well as a venue for concerts and public events. In fact, the upper balcony was also used by premiers and mayors to address large crowds who assembled in the market square below. The center of this town square served as the venue for many political parties to hold major rallies and public events in a post-independence Grenada. It was at that town hall building that Joan Purcell launched her candidacy for the prime ministership of Grenada in 1999, when she was elected to lead an NDC coalition to take on the then new National Party administration, whose government fell a few months earlier. The town hall building also served as the site for many meetings of the New Jewel movement and the People's Revolutionary Government. Apart from a site for political events, the town hall building was also the site for the St. George's Health Center and a number of doctors' offices, as well as a processing location for the Grenada Minor Spices Cooperative Marketing Society. There are many buildings in the city that have come to define the historic facade of the town of St. George. The town hall building was one such site. Now, while we appreciate that the building may have been in a state of disrepair, we ask this question: could this historic building have been saved? What about the other historic buildings in the city under the custody of the government of Grenada? Are structural integrity audits being done in tandem with the Grenada National Trust and the Willie Redhead Foundation to ascertain their structural integrity? We do understand that safety ought to be a priority when making decisions about what buildings are to be demolished and what buildings can actually be saved and salvaged. But with each passing year, the history of the town continues to be erased in a manner that also erases the history of one of the prettiest cities in the Eastern Caribbean. We do call for a complete pause and a complete audit to ascertain what can be salvaged and what needs to be demolished. And at this time, we wish to welcome our very first guest for this week's episode of the Bubb Report. He is Mr. Ali Gill, who is the chairperson of the Grenada National Reparations Committee. Mr. Gill, welcome to this week's episode of the Bubb Report.
Thank you very much, Kellon, and I'm delighted to be on your program once again. Thanks for having me. Good morning to all of your listeners and viewers.
Absolutely. Now, let us talk about this year's reparations lecture. It will be the third lecture. Now, it is also coming on the heels of the Trevelyan family apology in St. George's, a historic apology. In fact, no slaveholding family ever came forward to apologize except for them in Grenada. So that certainly was a red letter day for the reparation struggle. But this particular lecture is coming against the heels of that apology. It's also coming on the heels of the recent coronation of King Charles of England. So, could you talk to us about the significance of this year's lecture?
Definitely. And the this year's lecture, the topic is very timely. Indeed, we've had a couple of weeks ago the coronation of King Charles as King of England, and of course, the King or Queen, the monarchy of England, continues to be the head of state of Grenada. What that poses for us as persons who are leading the struggle for reparations against the British monarchy, the British government, institutions, families, and so on, who derive tremendous benefit from the genocide of the Amerindians, the Atlantic slave trade and slavery, is that while we continue to agitate and advocate for reparations, the issue of the king as head of state continues to be popping on because persons are saying to us, we are going for reparations against the monarchy. We demand an apology from King Charles. We demand reparations from the royal family. We demand reparations from the British government, and yet for the monarchy continues to be head of state. So to us, this is the age of reparations. Yes, we've had the Stone Age, we had the computer age. This is the age of reparations. And we need to discuss, we need to deal with the issue of republicanism in the age of reparations. In this age, what is the relevance of the king as the head of state of Grenada? And of course, this comes on the heels of Barbados a year or so ago, who would have gotten rid of um, the monarchy as head of state of Barbados. What are the pros? What are the cons? And I believe that there is no better person than Dr. Francis Alexis King's Council, who have blazed the trail with regards to constitutional reform, not just in Grenada, but in the Caribbean. He will be our keynote speaker and he will be addressing these issues. So all the trappings, we still have so much tremendous amount of trappings of colonialism, not just with the monarchy as head of state, but our final appellate court as well continues to be the Privy Council of England. While at the same time we have set up the Caribbean Court of Justice, which we've had two referendums on, and unfortunately, it was not successful. But that issue now needs to be again be addressed, maybe in a new dynamic, maybe where we need to educate the populace with regards to the significance of these things. And we begin with it on the 23rd of May, next on Tuesday, at the National Museum, where Dr. Francis Alexis King's Council will deliver on the topic republicanism in the age of reparations.
How much momentum do you think was gained from Barbados's decision to proceed with Republican status? Now we're hearing that Jamaica might be going in that direction, but outside of Jamaica, there has not been any sort of lockstep movement of the other territories in the Caribbean to say that we are going to get on board with not reparations but republicanism.
I think that's why we've had the prime minister saying the right things. The political leaders, they have been saying the right things. Not just Jamaica, and Prime Minister Gaston Brown have spoken eloquently on the issue. The new Prime Minister of St. Kitts have spoken on it. Prime Minister Gonzalez have spoken on it. A couple of weeks ago, we've seen that St. Lucia has now transitioned from the Privy Council to the CCJ. And I know that Prime Minister Pierre, that issue is not far removed from him. Here in Grenada, Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell has spoken on the issue. He has said it's not a priority of his administration, but of course he has encouraged lobby. He has encouraged discourse, and in on his visit to England during the coronation, he opined in a interview which he did that in his lifetime, it is quite possible that Grenada may do away with the monarchy as ever state. I would like to urge him and to say during his tenure as prime minister that Grenada should make such a move. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
the issue of republicanism is not a money intensive issue. In other words, the government does not need to have a large budget, and that will affect the economic or social programs of the government. And consciousness of the people and the education of our people, and to deepen our independence, deepen our sovereignty, right, with regards to the soul of our nation, so that we want to urge the government, and that is why today as well, Dr. Buck, we are launching the GNRS. We want to hear from the Grenadian people what they take with regards to republicanism, and we'll be launching today a survey on republicanism in the age of reparations, so persons can look out for it online. Just give your feedback, give your views on that issue. Let's have a national discussion on the issue. And this topic, as I said to people all the time, these topics are apolitical. There is no NLP, there is no NDC, there is no GLP, there is no GOD, there is no political affiliation with regards to the truly, sincerely national discussion that we need to have, regardless of your political persuasion. So this is not a party political issue. It's an issue truly of national development.
So, talk to us about that national survey. You said that the Reparations Committee is launching that national survey. How can the public access that national survey? What are some of the questions that are being that you're asking the public to answer in that survey?
The preamble of that survey reads: in less than a year, Grenada will celebrate its 50th anniversary. So here again, we're talking about timeliness of things. As we celebrate our 50th anniversary of independence next year, as a country, we're getting older. We're reaching the age of maturity. 50th anniversary of political independence from the UK, but still maintains the British monarch as its titular head of state. Should Grenada finally join the ranks of Caribbean countries, Trinidad, Guyana, Dominica, and Barbados, in completing its journey to political independence by becoming a republic and drafting a new constitution, or remain a constitutional monarchy? So we're asking the person to take a few minutes, and let us hear about these constitutional options as we begin the discussion on republicanism in the age of our reparation.
Mm-hmm.
Asking very basic questions. We want to get an age range of persons who participate in what are you thinking, what the young persons are thinking, the middle-aged persons, the older persons, what are their thoughts. We're trying to get also an idea of which part of the island that you're from, the parishes and so. And we ask you the question, should Grenada become a republic? And you say yes, no, or undecided. If yes, should a referendum be held to change the state of Grenada to a republic? And you answer yes, no, undecided. If no, what reason should the monarchy remain Grenada's head of state? So we're encouraging discussion. If a referendum was to change the state of Grenada to a republic, when should this referendum be held? Should it be held next year? Should it be held in 2025 to 2026? Should it be held in 2027 to 2028? Or should it be held beyond 2028? It's an idea. And I believe that when we collect that data, we can present it to the government and say, this is what we think, what is happening with regards to the discussion of Grenadians, what they are thinking with regards to the issue of republicanism. But the issue of republicanism, just as the issue of reparations, must be tabled for national discussion. We must have a fair and full and frank discussion. Those of us who are history, have a background of history and so on, we must speak out more on the issues. And that does not, of course, limit us to the Grenada National Reparations Committee. We know that there are other organizations that think similarly, or individuals and so on, to have that discussion, share your views, share your perspectives, and so on the subject. And as I said, I believe that on Tuesday, Dr. Francis Alexis will provide us with an excellent platform for that discussion going forward.
And Mr. Gill, before we segue into just the brass tacks of the lecture, and then we'll get to Dr. Simmons. there has been, and this is one of the things that I expected as well. There has been a reaction, a reactionary feedback, if you will, to calls for reparative justice. And I would just play a clip from Princess Anne, who is the sister of King Charles III. But Princess Anne's views on in what she said, which is in essence a negative reaction to reparations, is also reflective of many voices in the United Kingdom, including the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who, when the question of reparations was brought to Parliament, not even the question of reparations, but the questions of an apology was brought to Parliament by Labour MPs, he pretty much dismissed and rubbished the idea. And coming from somebody who comes from a country of origin that was colonized, it was quite rich to hear him rubbish and dismiss the idea. But let me play the clip from Princess Anna. I want to get you to react to that.
He did something interesting not long ago, offering tacit support to the research into the ties of slavery to the monarchy. He said, absolutely, have a look.
Well, you know more than I do, because I rather suspect that was the media's interpretation of that particular deal.
What's your sense of it?
Who knows who came up with that idea?
Is there a different sense? Do you have
It's not really a subject of conversation that I would even go down. A historical perspective, which is slightly different, maybe more realistic.
And which is?
No, the historical perspective, it just goes back a lot further. Mm-hmm. And the modern contexts are very different. Slavery hasn't gone away. Mm-hmm. No, come on. Mm-hmm. Don't be too focused on time scales and periods. History isn't like that.
There is so much to unpack there in respect of her total dismissal of colonialism and slavery by saying that slavery has not gone away and that we should not view history in this context. Please react to this.
Princess Anne and Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, they are both on the wrong side. And they fail to appreciate, for instance, that only in 2015, the British government finally finished paying the debt for the £20 million it borrowed in 1834 to pay reparations to the enslavers of England. They also fail to appreciate that the legacies of slavery and slave trade with generational wealth, which they have benefited from, which the United Kingdom has benefited from, and the generational poverty that we in the Caribbean and African and the Western African countries suffer from. And these legacies continue, right? So that this talk about, slavery and slave trade has gone on, centuries ago and so on. We see the impact and the continuing impact that it has on us here in the Caribbean as developing countries. And the fact that we have built their cities, we have built the slavery and the slave trade fueled the Industrial Revolution in England and made England what it is today. So that they're on the wrong side of history. And at the same time, while the conservatives in England continue to run scared with regards to the issue of reparations, we are seeing more and more persons coming forward. Just yesterday, we've had a good meeting with a family, again, from the UK that owned the plantation in the Tri-Island state here of Grenada, and they are prepared again to come forward and to do similar to what Lord Trevelyan and her family did in terms of making an apology and repair. And we have seen a lot of other like-minded families, and now they call themselves the heirs of enslavers, which includes the great-grandson of a former British Prime Minister who benefited tremendously from the slave trade and slavery. So more and more persons in the United Kingdom are coming on board with regards to supporting the cause of reparations. We've heard the president of Portugal saying that it is time that Portugal make an apology and to repair and to make repair. The Dutch government did it on the 18th of December last year. And you find more and more governments, more and more institutions, the Church of England, the Bank of England, more institutions, more governments, and so on are coming forward and say what we did, our role that we played was wrong. Even Prince Charles said sometime before, and he repeated it, that he expresses deep sorrow. We want to see that deep sorrow transitions into an apology and for them to make repairs. So we believe, Dr. Bubb, that we are making great strides. And despite, the pushback, despite the fact that some persons are still do not believe that reparations is the way to go, we are making significant inroads. Matter of time before Rishi Sunak and the royal family of London will see the light of day, and they will make an apology, and they will come forward and make repair for the harm that they have caused ancestors for the Atlantic slave trade and slavery.
So finally, Mr. Gill, the lecture, the memorial lecture, it will be at the Grenada National Museum. What time? I believe
Grenada National,
it's at
1 p.m. on Tuesday evening, and we invited all of Grenada. Of course, we'll have some live streaming. GIS will be covering the lecture as well, but we want to invite all of Grenada to tune in, and to listen to Dr. Francis Alexis Kingstown, who have been a foremost Caribbean voice with regards to constitutional reform and on these issues. And we could not have asked for a better keynote speaker, as right here in Grenada, we have the very best.
Absolutely. Chairman Gill of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, thank you again for availing yourself to be on the Bubb Report. And certainly we encourage the public to attend the reparations lecture that's happening next week. Also, we posted the survey in our chat so that people can avail themselves of the opportunity to complete that survey, which is attempting to assess the mood on the ground in respect of the appetite for going to Republican status. And we do have some viewer comments here. Terrence is saying it's time to get rid excuse me, it's time to get rid of the king as the head of state of Grenada. John Etienne is saying the struggle continues. Nigel Gravesandy is saying it must be recalled that Ghana was among the first country in CARICOM to delink itself from the monarchy when the new constitution was approved in 1970, and the Cooperative Republic of Ghana with a president as head of state. Today, Ghana has an executive head of state. He goes on, Ernesto is saying it's nice that we have talked about reparations, but we should start with Africa when our ancestors made slaves before spreading all over the world, including the Caribbean, because if we ignore the head, how can the rest of the body function? That has been a talking point as well, Chairman Gill.
Respond to that, and
Yeah.
we try to say to the slavery we speak of in Africa and Asia and so on is nothing compared to what we in the Caribbean experience. And persons need to appreciate the issue of chattel slavery or Africa's slave trade and on the plantations here in the Caribbean were considered to be bought and sold. They were insured, just as that, in fact, has the significance of the Abolition Act. The Abolition Act recognized African human beings as asset, as property, and it compensated the persons who own this asset and property for the loss of it in 1834. So that we painstakingly say all the time that the chattel slavery, and the same thing that the princess was saying, slavery continues and so on. But there is nothing, there's no slavery, the kind of which that was experienced here in the Caribbean that during 1900s and 1800s in the Caribbean. So that that point about Africa and so on is absolute nonsense, frankly. And I encourage persons to read the history carefully. Indeed, when they speak about, African traders bringing the African brothers and sisters for the white slavers and trading them, that happened in small, of course. We also have, it was the European Africans, the Amish creating this state of divide and things like that continues to in Africa up to dividing continent like official as minorities are who play difference in African states. When we ethnic clashes and so on today in Africa is a direct result of the Europeans dividing Africa up into different countries and so on. So we have to understand the history and not just continue to regurgitate what we would have been taught by the enslavers. But I know, Dr. Bob, you have other topics to discuss on your program, and I'll be listening to the other panelists to follow the issues as we go forward. So thank you so much for having us. We look forward to persons coming out on Tuesday, and also we use your program, Kellon, this morning to officially launch our reparations, our survey on republicanism in the age of reparations. So that's the official launch with regards to the survey on the Bubb Report. If I may just on first, this day we can do idea address this, so encourage all to can also you want and special persons were in African also it will be a daily thing rather than just a special occasion. So we will Western attire with jacket and so on, brand names, top European brands that want the African being so we play the African every day to encourage persons Emancipation Day, this is that you put on something African. So thank you very much, Dr. Bob, for having me.
Absolutely, Comrade Gill. Thank you again for appearing to represent the Reparations Committee. Viewers and listeners, we are going to take a quick break, and we will come back with our second spotlight guest of this week. He's Dr. Andrew Simmons. He'll give us a quick update in respect of some sand mining activities that occurred in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that has raised some significant concerns on the environmental front. But the government is saying that is part of their developmental thrust, and that the sand mining activities that is occurring on the southeastern flank of the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not going to affect the ecology of the area. So let us take this quick break, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching. And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the Bubb Report. I'm now joined by Dr. Andrew Simmons. He's an environmental scientist, and he is one of those who has been raising the alarm with respect to sand mining activities that is occurring on the southeastern flank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and in respect of the land reclamation and dredging that is occurring at the port of Kingstown to make way for a new port. Dr. Simmons, welcome to the Bubb Report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bob.
Yes, absolutely, sir. So you've raised concerns. Now, last week, there were two interesting developments occurring in the Eastern Caribbean, which goes against the backdrop of what has been occurring in Grenada in respect of the tensions between development and ecology. In St. Lucia, there were concerns this week that a major developer in Canada was encroaching on a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is the Piton, that a development might be occurring there. But some are saying that is a dated issue. But the fact is that St. Lucia may run the risk of losing its World Heritage designation site. Now we have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines the issue of the sand mining. You were featured in an Eyewitness News documentary on this issue. The government is saying, the Vincentian government is saying that would have no environmental impact. You're saying the latter. Why is the government incorrect?
Well, we asked in government said that they did quite a lot of reports. They did surveys, they did research and so on. And we are asking government to give us to share those with us, so that we can provide the analysis and so on. But the view from the communities, the view from my own research that I did in that area, and from the work that I did over the past 45 years as one of the founding members of the GEMS Progressive Community Organization, that it is, complete the opposite of what government is saying. Basically, let me just say something about the project itself. This, as you said, is the second largest project in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The first one was the Argyle International Airport. And the Argyle International Airport, I personally, face some very serious problem because government started to build that airport without an environment impact assessment study. And so that in 2006, 2007, I started to put pressure as one of the voices, but one of the voices from the community that is putting pressure on government to conduct an environment impact assessment study. So it was on the Argyle International Airport, and then there was a cross-country road. Eventually, it so happened that government did give way. They did the environment impact assessment study on both projects. The environment impact assessment study on the Argyle International Airport asked government to put a number to proceed, but they need to put a number of measures in place. And so that was done. The one on the cross-country road told government, no, you can't, this would be too dangerous because you cutting a road from across the country in the rainforest, and it would be the ecological disaster would be too much. Eventually, what happened? I took up assignment with the World Food and Agriculture Organization, the UN organization in St. Vincent, as the national coordinator for the government agriculture and economic diversification program, and I was fired. The government asked them to terminate my contract immediately. So, that happened. So I paid the consequences of that. And now, this thing is happening. I am in St. Vincent. I'm from that community. I'm living on the southeast, close to the airport. And here the government is, dredging an area. The sad thing is that the various, the proposal that was submitted to the CDB, which is one of the main fund of this project, the CDB, Caribbean Development Bank, and the British government. And there are a number of other funders, really, but these are the two funders. At no time, I went through the environment and social impact assessment study. I also went through the environmental management plan. These were documents that were submitted to the bank, and in no time, in those documents, at no place in those documents that spoke about any dredging of sand. In fact, the document said that in terms of the fill-in, that is, the government would be reclaiming about 16 acres of land, and the only dredging that is in that was for about 20,000 cubic meters of mud, so on, from the port itself. No place in it state that anything would be done. And basically what it said that the sand would be what they fill in, whether sand, whether quarry waste or whatsoever, these would be imported. And so, it is really concerning that that the government, after receiving that funding to implement this project, went about 360 degrees, and in a sense switch to dredging of an area in St. Vincent on the southeast, which is one of the most environmentally sensitive area in the country. And I said that because my organization, myself, and a number of different organizations been working in that to protect that area. That area, let me tell you something about that area. You have
and I just not wanting to cut you, but I believe that area also encompasses Brighton Beach. Would that be correct?
Brighton Beach, yes.
Yeah, which is an archaeological site, yes?
Yes, which is an archaeological site. It has one of the oldest, the settlement is over 3,000 years settlement, one of the oldest in the entire Caribbean, and maybe one. So that is located in that area. And what happened over the past years, over 40 years of sand mining, that about 3/5 of that area was destroyed by sand mining. And but also located in that area on the Brighton Beach, there's a mangrove swamp that is almost being destroyed. There is also an Brighton Salt Pond. You see, some of the potteries. Brighton Salt Pond, there's also another mangrove swamp. And you have the beaches of Brighton, Diamond, Stubbs, and Argyle, where the international airport currently is. Those are the beaches that are therefore in the and so there's a small, the local people call it Border, but it's the right name is Milligan Key. And in that island, on that island itself, that was designated as about sanctuary and also a reserve for migratory birds, an international reserve for migratory birds. Also in that area, just offshore, you have the Kingshill Forest Reserve, which is one of the oldest forest reserves in the Western Hemisphere. And this is where the first environmental law was created. The first environmental law in the world was created in 1791. That gives rise to that. The other important thing about that area is what you call from Bayaboo, right back across the Brighton Bay, the Diamond Bay, across to Brighton Salt Pond, there's a barrier, a sand barrier. And that sand barrier, whereas on the eastern part of the island, where that is extremely exposed to the climate change, all the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, and so on. That area is, quite a lot of the coastal areas. So Georgetown government had to build a wall that is over $50 million. Sandy Bay, half of that village will disappear, including the primary school. And one of the major reasons why the government outlaw, it is illegal to mine sand in Brighton Bay and Diamond Bay. It was because of the impact. All the statements from government between 2017 and 2018, they say that, look, it is too dangerous to mine sand from that area because we have to stop the sand mining from that area. So it is extremely annoying that when you look across the southeast, across that area, that there's a massive boat outside dredging the sand, the very sandbank that prevent the sea from coming in and protect that coastal area. That is what that they're dredging. If you look across that area now, that you can see a kind of muddy in the bays, because the boat would come, and I saw somebody was saying, a very respectable person was saying that they saw the boat less than 100 meters, or I'm not too sure whether it is meter, but I think I sent it to you, from the Argyle International Airport, and it is dredging the sand around the airport, and that entire the bays, it is coming into the bays. Some people said that when they saw it, they thought that it was a trawler, and they were saying, but how come that big trawler is right in the bay, but they didn't realize that it was dredging, because there wasn't any consultation from the government. The only time that they knew, it was when Jomo Thomas and I raised the alarm, and I went into all the villages and from that around that area, from Brighton, Diamond, up to Victoria Village, Stubbs, up to Bible, talking to people, trying to collect data, because I'm a researcher, trying to collect data from people. And what was interesting, that some years ago, I think up to last year, between 2017 to November last year, I worked with the community and my organization, GEMS, where we conducted a whole series of risk mapping exercises, trying to prepare the communities for these type of problem, in terms of what are the risks, pertaining to tsunami, the risk pertaining to sea level rise, the risk pertaining to hurricanes and that type of thing. And what we did, we brought people who are in their 70s and 80s to persons who were in their 15, 20 young people. And so we collected over 100 years, 120 years of data, from these persons, because those who were in their 80s, they were telling us, my grandmother or my father used to be at this place, and they would go out to the beach, but there's this barrier. So this is this protected shield, So what we are telling government, give us the information, all the studies that you said that you have done, share it with us, because we are taxpayers. We are the ones, our children, our grandchildren, and those who
the taxpayers are funding the land reclamation activity there at Port of Kingstown, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And we are telling government, give us the information, because there are people in St. Vincent who are very qualified, who can assess that. But I assume that they would not want to share it, because a government official went on the and said, well, the documentary, the eyewitness documentary, no, we would not share it because the ordinary people can't understand the technical issues. We are saying, share this with us, because what you're doing, it is not right. The other thing is that the government own the very thing that I lost my job for in 2008, when we forced the government to do hire this consultancy firm Knox. That is from in that report 2008. They're saying that the area is rich in ecology. They're saying that there are over 16 species of fishes that they found in that area. They're saying that besides the fishes, there's sea sponges they're saying that there's also coral reef north of the airport across the Yambo area. And they're also saying that one of the richest supply of lobsters that they've been located in that area. So for government to say that the area is dead and the area is, has no life and so on, to me that is total rubbish. And that is something that we were willing to engage the government. And remember when we spoke, I said, look, yes, I'm an activist. I've been an activist for 45 years. But over the years, working with government, that it was that level of activism that forced me to do my PhD.
Correct.
In this
because
area.
your thesis looked at the impact of climate change on young
Yes.
people and their communities and how one can build
yes.
resilience to prepare generations to deal with these impacts.
That is the whole thing. And I also published up until the 2nd of this month, my third book came out looking at dealing with climate change, capacity building in Africa and also in the Caribbean.
So has the government, based on conversation we had in background, it does appear that the reception you receive from your calls and the other community activist calls has been extremely negative. Is
very
that
negative,
the case?
and not just negative threats. I receive a number of threats, but for me, I've been in this thing for all my life. Threats. I work with a number of young people. Most of them are in senior positions across the Caribbean, from Dominican Republic right down to Guyana over to Belize. I was one of the co-founder of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. And so giving me threats and so on. Also, when I was at the Commonwealth Secretariat, I work in some of the most dangerous places in the world. So giving me its threats are something that I accustomed to. But I'm not going to say that I ought to take every threat serious. I'm taking the necessary precautions, but I also want to use this forum again. I was on radio last Thursday. I want to use this forum again just to tell government, look, be transparent. Be transparent, because governments are for a time, but the people would always be forever. Go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Simmons, 2 final questions. The first one is, because we getting to the next segment here. The first one is, don't you see a disconnect between a lot of Caribbean governments' posture on the international stage in respect of their advocacy around climate change and sustainability? They go to these COP summits, they attend these climate summits wherever they're held, and they talk about the role that the developing countries play in our environmental destruction. Yet at home, Caribbean governments are supervising the ecological destruction of many of the societies. Can you talk about that disconnect?
And it's very interesting that you raised that. 2015 was my last COP. The climate change meeting in Paris. And then after that, I said, look, I don't have the time and the energy, because I've seen, our governments, most of the time, the representative, most of the time, that when they're in these cities, they would come to the meetings on mornings, and then they disappear during the day. I'm not saying that all, because we have some very dedicated persons, and I can point to a number of very dedicated and serious persons in St. Vincent and a number of Caribbean countries. Ministers disappear, technical people disappear, so they're not part of any discussion and so on. And then decisions being made, and then but for me the problem with that is that there isn't much commitment. You know, these most of, and I said that quite a large percentage of the governments that we have in the Caribbean, they don't have much interest. And the sad thing is this, that, you know, but they can speak the words. They can tell you about sustainable development. They can use all the lingos, if I could use that word. But there's hardly any commitment, and that is being translated back in the country. Just in St. Vincent, that very project itself, and the northeast of the country, sorry, the government displaced a large number of farmers and their families, you know, and what they did, they opened a quarry. Foreigners, again, not persons in St. Vincent. The same problem with the sea. The persons who are doing the project are Canadian, so I can see the parallel with the issue in St. Lucia. And so the quarry, that they claim that the quarry was to do for the fill-in, but they didn't do any environmental assessment study. Because if they did do an environmental assessment study, they would have realized that what they thought was stone is an ancient volcanic flow. So here they are, they displace all these farm families who are very independent, that entire the area of Chateaubriand, Fitzhugh, and that type of thing. These persons are without any land, or the 58 acres of arable agricultural land was taken away from these persons. And so that is very sad. So now the situation is on the southeast, where you're dredging the area. Quite a lot of fisher folks from Caliacor right back to Bayabo are currently out of job. And one fisherman, I think the head of the Fisher Folks Association, he was on television, I think Thursday, and then I spoke to him. He was now, well, they're feeling the full impact, but that impact would stay until for maybe in the next 15 to 20 years. It would really that impact of people, because when you're talking about, there are two factors. I spoke to a number of fisher folks, and these are persons who would stand rock, not with boats, but they're from the community. They would go down on a daily basis. They would take enough fish to sell, and also for their families and that type of thing. And these guys said, look, since they do with the dredging, that the water is opaque, it's cloudy, you can't, and what is you're seeing is mud in a number of areas. And two, the machine that they're using drove all the fishes away, and there isn't anything that these fishes would come back. No, it's hardly likely, because what is happening, there's one thing that would be constant, is that climate change would the seas and so on would get warmer. The fishes would continue to drift into colder areas, and the sad thing, the seriousness of this impact, two levels. One, the beds and so on, where all these lobsters and fishes would live, now completely destroyed. The other factor is this: you're talking about approximately 26 to 30,000 persons, families, households being exposed to the full wrath of the Atlantic and what storms and so on coming in. So it's really for a government not to see and not to care, and telling us that we are getting 20 million doesn't add up. There's something wrong with the maths, because the document from the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, states that the government for the fill-in and so on, it would cost $32 million US dollars. So if you multiply it, if you break down 32 million into EC, and then you telling me I am paying you 32 million US dollars, and I am getting back 20 million EC. Sounds like somebody don't know figures, somebody can't do their maths, and to me, it doesn't add up. And I would like to say that, like the old folks, something in the matter besides
the pestle. Dr. Simmons, thank you so much for the update. Of course, we are going to attempt to get the government's position. We are going to attempt to get the data. But as I understand, some of my journalist colleagues in St. Vincent and the Grenadines have been having also a difficult and challenging time in accessing information from the government on those matters, from the physical planning unit, as I understand it. It's the same issue all over the Caribbean, an issue with accountability and transparency. Even though politicians in the campaigns, they talk about accountability and transparency, yet they do not want to be held accountable when they get into power. They seem to think that it's their own fiefdom. But that's just, I digress. Dr. Simmons, any final words before we go to the next segment?
Well, I would like to encourage the government to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I also like to encourage the community. There are quite a lot of fear in the community. So I'd like to, because there are a number of things that the community can do. I wouldn't say it here, but when I meet with community persons, and I love the rum shops meetings, and also at funerals. Those are excellent areas. And I would also want the people, because I saw now people coming out. I want for people to use their Facebook pages, and have community meetings. I am available to come to. Once they call me, I will be there. Threats or no threats, it doesn't mean anything to me. And because what we have to do, we have to change the narrative in in these countries. We have to show the politicians that there isn't any power than the people power, and the people are supreme. Thank you very much.
Dr. Simmons, thank you for agreeing to appear on the program. We will be certainly be following that story, because as someone who also studied climate change, this is important work, and we need to bear witness to history to these sorts of developments. So thank you again for appearing on the program.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, please stand by. We'll be right back.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Very proud of what you're doing, and I think it's much needed. So thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you again for watching the Bubb Report. Viewers and listeners, we want to thank you sincerely. Ashley, thank you so very much. Senator Chester Humphrey, welcome to the Bubb Report. Mr. Mitchell, welcome to the program. The Honorable Jumani Williams, we call him Jumani, who is the public advocate for the city of New York. The Honorable Basdio Pandey, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Pandey, welcome to the Bubb Report of Grenada. The Honorable Tobias Clement. Mr. Clement, welcome to the Bubb Report. Is it Nicolai or Nikolai? I hope I pronounced it.
Nikolai.
It's Nikolai. Thank you.
Yes.
And welcome to the program, Her Excellency Ambassador Luan Gilchrist. Mr. Randall Robinson, you are here in your private capacity and in your personal capacity. Yesterday, we learned that you were detained by law enforcement in Grenada. So you come from a family of public servants.
Yes, you're a family of public servants.
You're saying that you have to do more, but my question is, what have you done as president of the union to ensure that that happens?
To the cards that I have drawn, that I am the minister at this point in time. And for members of the public...
But you're also a servant of the people. Why would we have ambassadors representing the state that do not understand clearly what their terms of reference are? And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the Bubb Report. For the mothers and the parents who listen to the Bubb Report in their kitchens while preparing their Sunday lunch, please listen to this conversation closely, as it may affect your children who are sitting the CSEC exams in Grenada and in other parts of the Caribbean region where the CSEC exams are administered. And here to have this conversation with me are my former English teacher at the Presentation College, who is the current principal of the Presentation College and a member of the CXC board. He is Mr. Dominic Jeremiah. And he's not here representing the Presentation College, but certainly he is aware of what's happening in respect of CXC preparations there. And Mr. Joshua Andel, who is Grenada's CARICOM Youth Ambassador, recently elected Youth Ambassador to CARICOM. He's also a past student of the Presentation Brothers College of Grenada, proud past student. Some might say that this is a PVC panel this morning, but I make no apologies for that. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. We are discussing CXC today. Of course, Mr. Jeremiah, I want to begin with you because last week, of course, CXC held a press conference in which they attempted to address and confirm that there in fact was a leak of the math exam. Now, Mr. Jeremiah, can you tell us, it would appear, and I would quote a student he's the president of the National Secondary Students Council in Jamaica. His name is Jordan Bailey. And he said that the allegations of a leak come as no surprise to students, as, quote, it's something that happens every year in Caribbean countries that are claimed to be favored by CXC, unquote. Mr. Jeremiah, what do you make of the students' characterization of leaks? He's saying that this is not the first time that this has occurred in the context of the digitization of CXC. Your thoughts as somebody who is on the board, on the council, sorry, the CXC council.
Well, good morning, Dr. Bubb.
Yes.
And good morning to all your listeners. Thank you for having me on this morning. It's a pleasure.
Yes.
I want to preface what I'm going to say by first of all positing that CXC as a regional organization, its mandate is to serve the entire Caribbean, to serve all our students, our schools, and they are invested in trying to do just that. But the security of examination papers and so depends heavily on our professionals across the region. Mm-hmm. And I think I have to say that given the thousands and thousands of scripts that have to go across the region from CXC, over the years, our professionals have demonstrated tremendous integrity. Mm-hmm. However, because of the human factor that is involved in the transacting of CXC examination, every once in a while, it has been reported that there may have been a leak of the papers. And I know that CXC and governments across the region have done a lot within their power to ensure that that does not happen. When it does happen, it becomes, a serious concern for all of us, for teachers, for education officials for students across the region. As you have seen from this recent announcement of a leak, and I think CXC in his press conference on Friday moved expeditiously to try to see how it could arrest the situation to ensure that no other papers are leaked. The only paper that we have heard of is the mathematics paper. And I think CXC must be commended for doing a marvelous job in trying to get to the source of that leak in such a short period of time. But I cannot overemphasize the fact that when we speak of CXC as this body that is removed from everybody else, that we have to cease from looking at CXC that way, because every Ministry of Education across the region is connected to CXC. Every government is connected to CXC. CXC is at the service of our people across the region. And therefore, there is a tremendous dependency on the professionalism and the integrity of persons who have to manage the education process. So I wouldn't say that it is widespread, because in my experience as a teacher and as a principal over the last 35, close to 40 years, given the possibility of what could happen, we really have not had many major leaks of papers across the region. We have had a couple, and anytime something like that happens, I know CXC has done, together with the ministries of education and governments, have done everything within their power to try to prevent it from happening. The truth is that we do not want these leaks to happen, because it has the potential to seriously compromise.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Jeremiah. Let's talk, though, about how do you, at least at the lower levels of administering the exams, and you mentioned human error there, but that there appears to be a weakness in the context of ensuring that there is confidentiality in place by the people who are responsible for, shall we say, the distribution of these scripts across the region. How would CXC ensure that in the various territories that that those people are held to a particular standard of confidentiality?
Well, I from what I know, CXC has been doing workshops. CXC has been having conversations with local registrar, because every territory has a registrar that, in essence, works on behalf of CXC to coordinate the management of the exams in each territory. And I know that even at the council level and other levels, CXC places great emphasis on ensuring that these processes are managed in such a way that we do not have any leaks. Ensuring that we know that these are a tremendous investment in trying to ensure that that does not happen. But as I say, every once in a while you may have, a case where it does happen, and I think we have to emphasize, even on the part of those persons who are charged with the responsibility of managing this process, the importance of integrity, because at the end of the day, even when we had the GC O-level exams and A-level exams, Cambridge depended heavily on the integrity of the people who are resident in these territories to guard the exams and to make sure that there was no compromises.
Absolutely. Now let us talk about this current math exam. CXC did indicate, and I'm sure you were part of that decision as well, to I suppose scuttle that aspect of the math exam. Now, how would that particular exam now be graded? I know that the SBA, I believe, would account for part of that grade. And what else would account for that particular math score for this year's exam?
Okay, I wasn't necessarily part of the decision, but CXC, through its internal deliberation and after consultation with other persons, came to the conclusion, as was shared at the press conference on Friday, that the paper 2, which was the paper that was compromised, is going to be cancelled, aborted. And CXC is now going to use the SBA scores from mathematics and the scores from the English paper 1, which is the multiple choice paper, to make a determination. So they're going to use these 2 categories of grades to make a determination as to what the final result will be for each student across the region. And luckily, CXC has this as an option, because in fairness to the process, it would be difficult to use, the scores from the paper 2 that has already been compromised to calculate the final grade. Now, we have some precedents for that, given the adjustments that CXC had to make in 2021 during COVID-19, when a determination had to be made to use the multiple choice paper together with the SBAs to determine what the final results were going to be. Now, I think in reflecting on all of that and in making judgments and conclusions on these matters, what CXC has to ensure happens, 1 is the integrity of the process, 2, to protect the standards of the exam, because remember that CXC is an internationally accepted examination, and therefore whatever processes are used to make determinations about final grade, it has to be well thought out and done in a manner that the integrity and standards of CXC's certification will not be compromised in any way.
Mm-hmm. And let me bring in Joshua here. And Joshua, you're currently CARICOM Youth Ambassador, but I consider you well. They call your generation the Gen Z generation. You're digital natives. You grew up with the technology. You have different learning styles in respect to how we prepared for exams. But in this year's CXC examination, and that also occurred last year, I believe, you've had some petitions that were mounted by students of your generations. And let me just go ahead and share this year's petition. And I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, during my time, that was not even an issue. Because we studied for all of the topics, and Mr. Jeremiah can attest to this. We studied of all of the topics that were outlined for the different subjects. But candidates around the Caribbean are hoping that the Caribbean examination, now there's a typo there, would release the various CSEC subject broad topics before the exam. This petition was created to bring awareness and at least try to have some sort of impact. What are your thoughts on that idea? Why is there a need to for students to have those topics beforehand? Why not have the abilities to study for all of the topics that will be covered on the exam? What are students telling you?
Good morning again to all the viewers and Dr. Bubb. It's honestly a pleasure to be here again. To start off, I would start by saying this whole debacle kind of started the very first time the broad topics were released, and at that time it was extremely fair, 100%, because the time frame in which exams were announced and the date we had, the amount of time we had to prepare for it, it was extremely short. So at that time it was 100% fair. However, going off of that, a lot of the students continue to ask for broad topics simply because it seemed very unfair to them that those students in that specific year were able to get the broad topics, and every year after that, they, like other students, we weren't able to get the broad topics. In my year for Cape, I was able to get the broad topics for all of my units, etc. And most of the students this year, they weren't able to get the broad topics as well. So I just think it's students simply abusing, kind of trying to express how they feel, because I understand how they would feel kind of, kind of neglected, you'd say, or kind of how the whole situation would be unfair to them, given that other students got broad topics, whereas they weren't able to get the broad topics to prepare for their examinations. They may kind of see it as, like I keep repeating, unfair. However, it's important to take into consideration the very first time that broad topics were kind of introduced, the conditions under which they were introduced. That's what made it fair. However, no, I don't see any reason for the broad topics to be released to the students, seeing that a lot of students before the broad topics were released, myself included for CXC, when we were preparing, a lot of students passed without the broad topics. But know that the broad topics were released once, a lot of students are saying that it should be a continuous thing, and they're trying to make it something that's like an every year thing now. However, I completely disagree with the broad topics being released, seeing that students would have enough time to prepare for the examinations in their 5-year period in secondary school, of course.
And Mr. Jeremiah, let me bring you in here. I want you to add to this conversation on the broad topics. Can you give us the context of the reasoning behind the release of those broad topics? Did it have anything to do with COVID-19?
Correct. I couldn't wait to get in on the conversation because prior to COVID-19, we would not be talking about broad topics. But I think what CXC tried to do during the period of the pandemic was to find creative ways to see how they can assist students to make up for the loss of time. Remember that instruction was affected, the ability of the students to prepare in a way that they were already under pressure and they were already challenged during that period. CXC made it very clear at the end of the 2021 examination period that it was its intention to return to its regular schedule of exams and the regular conduct of the exams. And so in 2022, some accommodations had to be made in terms of giving students more time to prepare for the exam because of the disadvantage that they suffered as a result of ongoing pandemic challenges. Now that we have returned to a normal execution of the exams, we have a syllabus that students have access to and teachers have access to for each subject. The syllabus is quite detailed. It reminds us that our preparation for exam is not just only about passing the exam, but it's about covering a certain amount of content in each subject so that the student would be competent and ready for the next stage of the academic journey and development. And so, like Mr. Andal, I do not necessarily subscribe to the view at this time that we should be providing the broad topics to all of our students across the Caribbean, because the truth is that it's good for the students to be able to prepare for the course of studies that they're responsible for each subject, and not only be focused on just the topics for the exam, but to have a broader preparation for the exam. And the statistics would show that prior to the pandemic, our students across the Caribbean did very, very well. Certainly in Grenada, we did very well. We did not have broad topics to necessarily focus the preparation for the exam. but the teachers did an outstanding job in making sure that they manage the preparation process well. Remember, the preparation doesn't begin in Form 5. It begins in Form 1, it gets intensified in Form 3, and certainly by the time they get to Form 5, they have sufficient time to cover the entire syllabus. And it's important for them to cover most of the syllabus, if not all of the syllabus, because that is going to set the foundation for what is going to happen at the tertiary level. So I agree with Mr. Andel.
Yeah, Mr. Andel, what do you think accounts for this this new way of wanting to learn? What do you think influences? Because I mean, the Caribbean. I am a product of Caribbean education, a proud product of Caribbean education. What do you think? How do you think this generation perceives learning that is different from how we have articulated learning in the past?
Well, I'd like to start by saying there are a lot of tools available right now online that are free of use for a lot of the students to kind of aid in their learning and stuff like that. And a lot of students learn differently. Me, myself, I normally teach myself an environmental class simply because I don't learn by the normal chalkboard and chalk kind of method. Yes, I normally don't learn by that. So I think the main influence is students kind of trying to, how should I put this? A lot of students learn differently. So now that they're asking for the broad topics, it makes the learning for them a lot easier. And instead of trying to designate or kind of delegate the blame elsewhere, they're trying to get the broad topics to kind of make it easier for themselves. When in reality, like Mr. Jeremiah rightfully stated, even before the broad topics were not a thing, students were able to prepare for their exams well and even perform considerably. If you check the statistics, sometimes you may say even better compared to after the broad topics were kind of introduced. So I think it's kind of trying to, instead of trying to delegate the blame, they're trying to make the learning process a lot easier for them, which kind of takes into consideration the fact that a lot of teachers or a lot of lecturers, you would see, they don't understand that different students learn different ways. And most students won't learn by the traditional methods. So trying to get the broad topics that kind of influence how they're thinking right now, making it a lot easier, given that a lot of teachers, a lot of lecturers don't understand that some students don't learn the same traditional way. So getting the broad topics kind of helps them prepare for the exams a lot more, where they're able to go home, and so long as they understand how they're learning, to make it a lot easier for themselves.
Mr. Jeremiah, your thoughts on that? How are schools accounting for the different learning styles of students? How are schools preparing for and accounting for the evolution in the way that students access information, quite frankly, with the help of artificial intelligence in many respects? In this digital age, a lot of these kids are digital natives. When I tell students in Grenada how I prepared for my CXC exams, they look at me as though I'm crazy. But I just want to get your thoughts on what Mr. Andel just articulated there, Mr. Jeremiah, as an educator.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Andel shared is very important. In this era of technology, students have a lot more available to them to prepare for CXC exams. As a matter of fact, CXC has gone out of their way to provide something called the CXC Learning Hub. CXC has developed even more material that students can access electronically to aid with their studies. So there's a lot more available for students to augment their studies than were available when you were at school, or even when I was at school. However, one of the things we have to guard against across the Caribbean, as we try to develop our Caribbean civilization, and we try to ensure that we prepare ourselves to compete with the rest of the world, is that whether we have material available to us electronically or not, students must understand, they have to be taught, they have to be reminded that they have to work hard, that the fact that we have technology doesn't trump the need for us to spend time with the material, to learn the material, to apply themselves to the material, because there could be a temptation out there to think that because we have technology, students do not have to sweat anymore. They do not have to work hard anymore. They do not have to schedule their time properly for studies and postpone other things that may interfere with their ability to prepare well.
Mm-hmm.
So hard work is not trumped by technology. You have technology, and technology provides some avenues for students to assimilate material better. But it doesn't eliminate the need for students to be reminded, as students to know that they have to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that because we have different modes of learning now, that there are students who are very visual learners who can make greater use of the technology that's available. So for example, if you're studying biology and you're a visual learner, you may want to capitalize on the resources that are available for you to pay more attention to the diagrams that you could just simply access on the internet. And so your visual learners, your tactile learners, teachers have to make sure that they create opportunities in the lab setting, in the practical setting of the delivery of the content, where students are not only, as Mr. Andel hinted, are only experiencing chalk and talk, but there's just so many avenues for the students to be able to use their particular learning style to assimilate the material, to understand it, and to be able to maybe even ask questions when they don't understand it. So that is the advantage of technology. It has given us the ability now. And I think I'm seeing it in my own school that there are teachers who are always, they haven't stopped since the pandemic. They are continuing to use the blended approach. So they do some face-to-face teaching in the context of the classroom, but there are assignments that are given to the students to consolidate the content that they are learning by using the resources that are available online. So I want to emphasize that technology doesn't mean that students do not have to work hard. And we have to be drilling that down, and we notice a habit that has emerged as a result of COVID-19, that some students are not applying themselves. And I'm hearing the comment, not only here in Grenada, but across the region, that there are some students who have been used to just being online, and they forget that they have to spend time by themselves, spend time in groups, making sure they get their assignments done, that there is work to be done that they must attend to, the way students 10 and 15 years ago attended to their work, and not just simply think that because of technology. I'm eager to say something about AI because, but
yes, because that is something we actually getting into, and I'm sure that is something Joshua would be excited to discuss as well. As an educator myself, the AI conversation is something we're having at my institution as well. In fact, we have protocols in place for that now. But let us get to some viewer comments. Mr. Jeremiah, Mr. Nigel Gravesandy is asking, would you reflect and comment as to where the paper being cancelled as an option would be testing specific competencies that would be critical for matriculation into tertiary institutions for specific disciplines, example, engineering?
Well, good day, my good friend, Mr. Gravesandy. It's a very thoughtful question that Mr. Gravesandy is positing. And I think in CXC's consideration of offering this as the option for giving the final grade in mathematics, that these very concerns must have been considered. Because a lot of the students who did the paper two really offered the opportunity for the students to demonstrate their understanding of certain topics, and also to also demonstrate their competencies in these particular topics. So it is my hope and my understanding, because the paper one also tests in a different way, but also tests for these very competencies that Mr. Gravesandi is pointing to, except in a different, as I said, in a different way, because the paper two offers the opportunity for the students to actually do the calculations and solve the problem, so that the examiner can actually see how well the students understood the particular topics that have been tested. But I think the fact that paper one is also dealing with the same profiles. There are 3 profiles in mathematics, and they're accounting for testing of those 3 profiles. I think at the end of the day, the students would be okay.
Okay, and we have another comment. Let's see here. Content of subject is providing knowledge of subject with syllabus. Testing is proof that some aspects of importance of the content is mastered. So Jeremiah, your thoughts on that idea? I'm not too sure if the viewer was trying to. That's Wendy. Good morning, Wendy Hester. Good morning. I'm not sure if that was just a comment or. And then she said,
we have to keep in mind that all evaluation that's done, whether it's done in the classroom or is done through the CXC examination, that ultimately these assessments are trying to ascertain that the students understood the objectives, because these are objectives that are set out in the syllabus for the students to master. So yes, you have to have mastery of the content, and I hope I understand in the comment. You have to have mastery of the content, but the exam is not something that is done as an end in itself, but the exam is meant to test whether the students not just master the content, but master the objectives that are set out in the syllabus for the students to cover. All right, because assessment is about testing objectives, you know, and so when a teacher is teaching and setting an exam, even as we prepare for this end of year exam, we remind our teachers that really what you are assessing, you know, or whether the students master the objectives that was set out by you in your respective classes during the course of the term or during the course of the year.
And we have another question from Margaret Francis. She's asking, availability and access are not the same things. We need to be clear on that. How many kids have access to available online content? Mr. Jeremiah?
That's a fair question, because as we deal with equity in education across the region, it is true. And even in Grenada, we learned a lot during the pandemic that a lot of our students were disadvantaged because there were certain technological structures that were not in place to ensure that the students had equitable access. That's certainly true across the region. There are some countries across the region where the students, if they live in a particular location, they may be disadvantaged because they do not have access to the technology. And so when we say things are available, we have to say that bearing in mind that there may be students who, even after the pandemic, still do not have access to the technology. I know from time to time, even in my school, there are students who do not have a gadget, or they may have had a gadget, but something went wrong with the gadget. Fortunately for us in Grenada, I think previous governments and current government have done a lot of work to ensure that we come as close to equitable access as possible. But it is true that availability and access are not necessarily the same thing. And so we have to always be keeping our eyes on those students who are still disadvantaged because they do not have the availability of the gadgets or the Wi-Fi or whatever it is to be able to have access.
Joshua, I'll bring you on this question as well. There is the idea, the notion that because you are a digital native, you are a digital native. You were born in the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Chat GPT, what else? Snapchat. I heard of a new one now, Be Real. There is just so much of them. You were born in this age, and so what do you think of this idea of access? What do you hear from your peers around access to those specific learning tools that are needed to enhance your ability to take exams?
Well, I would not call ChatGPT something that would help students learn, rather something that would kind of affect their learning. However, I do believe that access is directly proportional to an understanding of how a lot of these tools work. Because in my early years in PBC, I did not have a gadget. However, it really did affect my understanding of how to use certain apps or certain websites or stuff like that on the internet. So, whereas my other peers who did have access to, for example, a laptop or a phone or something like that in Form 1 and Form 2, they were much more proficient in using a lot of the websites and a lot of the apps that would help them prepare for their exams a lot faster. They were much more proficient in that aspect. So I really agree when I say that access is directly proportional to your level of understanding when it comes to a lot of the tools that are available for an individual or for a student to help them prepare for the examinations.
And now that takes us to, and of course we'll entertain one more viewer comment, Mr. German, and then we'll get to the AI conversation here. The viewer is asking, Ernesto is asking, excuse me, do we really need CXC and GC exams, especially CXC, because in the diaspora, especially in the USA, this is worded terribly, sorry, with respect. You still have to be qualified with that set in their system. So he's saying that CXC means that. Mr. Jeremiah, your thoughts on that idea?
No, that's not entirely true, because a lot of our students, if they are going to get access to colleges and universities in the States or in England or even in other parts of Europe, one of the tool that these universities and colleges rely on is the CXC and CAPE results. I have to deal with that on a daily basis, either talking to colleges, talking to universities across the world. They rely heavily on our CXC and our CAPE results. And these results can make the difference as to where the students begin their program. Some of the students may be even able to get a reduction in the amount of credit that is required for them to graduate from these universities. I know some students who graduated from TAMCC here who got accepted to universities in the United States, and the universities were willing to take over 100 and something credits, in one case 170 credits, leaving the student only about 2 years to finish the program. So I've heard the comment before. It's not a very well-informed comment because our students must understand that if they are going to perform well elsewhere, that the exams that they are doing, and as I want to re-emphasize too, is not just the exam, but the content that they have to master is necessary if they are going to function and do well in university and colleges outside of the Caribbean region. Of course, UE, you need CAPE and you need CXC to enter UE and any other regional institutions. And our students, because they have been attentive to the need for them to master the content, when they go overseas, they have been doing very well. So we don't want to relax that and give the impression that somehow CXC and CAPE exams are not necessary. That is before this thing.
So Mr. Onesta says he's talking about living in the United States, not as an outsider. Well, Mr. Jose, you know, the American universities, CXC is not administered in the United States, first of all. Every country must have a standardized testing system for their students. Even at my institution, at my university, we require standardized testing scores to admit students. That's just the way it works across the world. So I don't think there would be a need for us to rubbish the idea or the importance of CSEC exams, the importance of these exams in our Caribbean civilization. But let us segue into this conversation on AI, Mr. Jeremiah and Joshua. And this is how I will begin this conversation. As a professor, one of the things that I do, we actually have software now. It's very similar to SafeAssign that can actually detect papers generated by ChatGPT. But I want to give our viewers and listeners a demonstration of how this works. And now I'm going to ask ChatGPT here to write an essay on Morris Bishop. So a student gets an essay on, actually, let's add Morris Bishop and Eric Gary here. Eric Gary. So a student gets a social studies assignment on these both leaders here, these both Grenadian leaders. This is what comes up, and let us have a look at this. So here we have this artificial intelligence software. Again, this is very scary to me as a researcher. But one of the things that we did at our institution is that we were introduced to the software so as to know how to detect it in students' writings. But so I want to begin with you, and then it also gives you the option here. You can actually continue generating. Okay. So, Mr. Jeremiah, I want to begin with you. How are institutions in Grenada and the Caribbean dealing with this new AI intrusion into the academic learning system?
Well, first of all, I was introduced to this same software that you demonstrated on the screen.
Yeah.
In December. So I visited a friend's house, and he knows that I'm in education, so he wanted to show me, and I was mesmerized by what was possible. Now, I just want to make some preliminary comments before I respond directly to your question. That since then, I have had a session on what is called Thoughtful Thursday. It's a forum for principals across the Caribbean. The Caribbean Association of Principals of Secondary School have this program every Thursday, and I've been a part of it. And one of the topics was AI. And I have been doing my own reading and my own research on AI since. I want to say that artificial intelligence is a reality that is now upon us. And it is not going to go away. And we in the modern world have to deal with it. The truth is that we don't all know or have all the knowledge that is necessary to know everything about AI and how it works, and the potential that we know that there is tremendous potential for good as we go into the future. However, I want to posit that, and I've been sharing this with my friends and even my colleagues, that we have to be open. We need to learn as much as we can. And we also need to be cautious so that AI doesn't alter or interfere with our humanity, what it means to be human. Because I think that is the worry that exists in scholarly circles about just how far AI is going to go and to what extent it's going to affect our ability to function as rational, creative human beings. As far as education is concerned, we have to begin to put structures in place. As you indicated, your educational institution has been doing, putting structures in place to protect the educational process so that our digital natives, our future researchers, don't simply go to AI, using this particular app and just generate information that is not there. So I think the integrity of original work, we have to do a lot to try to, and have a lot of conversations about how we protect original work, protecting the integrity of research, because there is a place for research in academia, and we have to figure out how to protect original research, and at the same time, the degree to which AI may be able to help us to even generate even more credible research. And then, of course, the big issue of just guarding against plagiarism, which I think is the overarching problem. So everyone who is in academia around the world at every level is confronted with this new challenge. There is certainly the potential for good, but there is also the potential for greater challenges. And certainly in our Caribbean civilization, if we're going to continue to advocate for the development of our people, for particularly the educational advancement of our people, we have to make sure that we have fora in place that would help us to reflect on this, to ensure that there's no negative impact on the development of our region.
Let's talk about students managing. So, for example, a student in Form 5 in PBC gets a homework assignment, a social studies assignment such as the one I just demonstrated there. How do you guard against ensuring that that the student, and who is to say that the student will not use the software, but how do we ensure that the student is properly assessed when they submit that particular homework assignment, that particular written assignment?
The question that you're posing is a conversation that is just beginning in our schools. I think the first layer of introduction has to do with principals and teachers understanding the potential of AI and the degree to which it's going to affect our teaching and learning process. But I think we are going to have to be a lot more creative going forward, so that when we give assignments, that we would have to think through how we set these assignments, what kind of rubric we are going to use to judge the assignment, and what kind of surveillance mechanism we'll have to put in place to make sure that the student is not just simply presenting an AI-generated response to a question, and not having had a chance to reflect on it themselves. So how we manage that process is a conversation that is beginning. I don't have all the answers to it yet, but I was speaking to one of my teachers recently, and I realized that already there is some thoughts about how we might begin to approach this problem, because we do not want students to just simply present for assessment AI generated material without they themselves engage in the material, understanding the process of researching, so that they can become independent learners in the process. And there are certain skills that they're supposed to acquire, particularly even at the secondary and TAMCC level, in preparation for higher learning. So we don't want that to be case at the lower level, where those skills, those habits, those educational formative habits are going to be shortchanged, so that they grow up simply just depending on the technology to answer all the questions.
Joshua, let me bring you in here. Your generation, your peers, what conversations are you having with your peers on Chat GPT? I mean, sometimes I see all of these lovely things on TikTok, because I was forced to download TikTok as an educator to know what my students are up to understand the software. Yes. So that I don't sound as a dinosaur in class. But what are your students saying about AI? Your peers?
Peers. Well, I'd like to begin by pointing out, you rightfully stated that right now we have software that can detect if something is written through artificial intelligence. However, we now have software that can kind of deflect the detection. So you put it in and it tells you how much percent is written in artificial intelligence, what exactly you need to change, and how to get it to sound more human-like. And for a small fee of a few US dollars a month, sometimes even free, you can just simply do that and kind of go about your way. So right now, I'd start by saying that a lot of my peers, they kind of have trouble with artificial intelligence, because a lot of the AI tools right now, for example, ChatGPT, it's a natural language processing tool. And one of the main things that a lot of people kind of skip over is that it works kind of proportionate to your level of intelligence and how you understand how to use it. So for example, the same question that you put into ChatGPT, if a student is not performing that well in class and they bring this well-written essay to the teacher, obviously the teacher would understand that something is totally wrong, if you understand what I mean. So a lot of students, they don't understand, a lot of my peers don't understand how to use these kind of AI tools, and as a result of it, they kind of neglect it. There's a small there of course there'll be a small few that would try, of course, their best to integrate it and kind of improve the level of their work. However, I did several presentations on this to CARICOM members, and the main thing that I focused on was using ChatGPT and other AI tools in conjunction with one's creativity. And I think that is something that teachers, lecturers, educators should do in general as well. Try and understand how it is that you can use all of these AI tools to help, rather than kind of just leave it there. They know it's there, the students know it's there. So the next step, one of the next logical steps would be kind of to sit down together and kind of understand how they can integrate it into the learning process to make life a lot easier, rather than wondering or questioning if, of course, a student would bring something that is written through with artificial intelligence.
Talk to me about that integration. How do you see that integration working?
Well, there are several ways that you can use ChatGPT. Well, we're focusing on ChatGPT right now, but there are a lot of other AI tools. There are several ways that you can use it. One main way I would say is by, for example, using not a whiteboard, but an electronic board, a projector of some sort, and kind of highlighting, first of all, the negative effects of ChatGPT, because one of the main things that a lot of educators or a lot of students don't know with ChatGPT and a lot of other AI tools would be that they are generated with years and years of experience, and specifically human experience. And as a result of that, they have a lot of the social norms and gender bias that comes along with them. So there are a lot of negative effects that come along with ChatGPT. So I think the integration process could start by kind of trying to get students as well as educators to understand the positives and the negative effects of using artificial intelligence in their work, presenting work, or to kind of help them, then they can move ahead. The second step would be to kind of understand how you can use it to your advantage. For example, I'm a person who learns kind of independently. ChatGPT would work wonderfully for me. So a teacher would be able to come to me and say, hey, you would be able to use this. You can type in these kind of prompts, because what you typed in for ChatGPT is a prompt. You can type in these kind of prompts to help you understand the essay. For example, the same essay you wrote, you can ask, okay, how did you come up with this introduction? What about this introduction stands out? How did you come up with the 3 body paragraphs? So I believe that that's one way that lecturers, educators can use it as well, kind of identifying the different learning styles and showing students how these artificial or AI tools can help them kind of make life a lot easier, help them with their kind of learning styles as well. But there are several ways that you can use AI to kind of make the learning process a lot easier.
Mr. Jeremiah, a case here has been made by your former student that, again, and I believe it's the same the theory of the case you were making here, that AI is here to stay. It's here to stay. We have to find ways of living with it. What are your thoughts on what Joshua just articulated?
No, I think the way he articulated it, I don't know that I could say it better. But what I want to emphasize from what he just articulated is the fact that we cannot just look at the negative aspects of AI. We really have to begin to figure out what are the ways in which we can use AI to our advantage. And of course, not negating the need for students to understand process, all right? And I'm emphasizing process here because if a student is required to write an essay, of course, there are different types of essays, but we have to figure out a way to use the AI, the information that the AI might be presenting to us, to integrate it into helping the students how to understand process. So that they're not just simply using AI as a cheap way of responding to a need or to solve a topic. But going forward, I think it's going to place a lot of demand on us as educators to pay attention to process. And when I spoke about rubric earlier, when we give an essay to write, we will have to pay attention to what are those specific things we want to look for in those essays, as we have been doing for generations. But we're going to have to emphasize that more and maybe find a way to see how we can integrate what AI is doing in the process. And here we're using the writing process because you use the writing response as the example on the app. So that's what we are responding to. So I am not afraid of AI. I'm cautious, but I'm open because it's really an opportunity to learn. I think we are just beginning to scratch the surface. My worry, though, about AI, the degree to which AI might interfere with the job market and make certain professions that are necessary now become obsolete. Because if artificial intelligence is going to be more intrusive into our workspace, into our social, economic, political life, the degree to which AI might make certain jobs, certain roles, certain responsibilities redundant. And if that is the case, the extent to which that is going to affect the quality of our economic life, as societies plan how they're going to develop and grow and create opportunities for the citizens. So it's not just within education. I know our focus is on education, but I'm thinking more broadly how AI potentially could have a negative effect on society. But on the other hand, there may be some other positive benefits that AI might bring, but this requires a collective ongoing reflection so that we can come to a place where if AI is here to stay, we can come to a place where we can accept the reality that AI is with us.
Absolutely. And on that note, Joshua, we are going to get to some closing comments. So I want to begin with you to offer some closing comments on everything. And before we do, Joshua, you were recently appointed as Grenada's CARICOM Youth Ambassador. So congratulations to you on that. So tell me, what will be your, what are you bringing to the table as the new CARICOM Youth Ambassador?
Well, I was, to be specific, I was actually appointed as the male CARICOM Youth Ambassador for Grenada. The female CARICOM Youth Ambassador would be Josel Nichols. And together, we have several mandates, but a few would be mainly financial literacy and sexual education, trying to get students to understand the positives, the negative effects of safe sex, of all of the kind of STIs that are out there, and financial literacy in the sense that a lot of students don't understand going into the real world. They don't understand budgeting, they don't understand renting versus home owning, they don't understand how to manage a lot of the money that they have, how to get loans, how to set up a credit card, debit cards, a lot of those stuff. So two of the main mandates you can see that we have are firstly sexual kind of education, and secondly financial literacy. But we have a lot of plans that we are working on to try and roll out in the span of 2 years, because we have a 2-year tenure.
Okay. All right. So over to some closing comments on today's topic.
I'd like to close by saying that I would like to congratulate CXC on the work that they've been doing over the past few years to try and accommodate the students who are kind of affected by COVID-19, and the work that you're continuing to do to try and get students back to the state of normalcy. And moving on to the artificial intelligence, well, Mr. Jeremiah stated it correctly. He said artificial intelligence is here to stay. So I would kind of push my educators out there right now who are listening or who would listen to this to find ways to integrate artificial intelligence into your learning style, into your teaching styles, and do it in a way that students would understand that it's not something that they can use simply to cheat, or it's not something that they can use simply to make life easier for them, but it's something that everyone can use to uplift themselves and to become a better person. Because I myself use a lot of artificial intelligence when it comes to my business. I run a digital marketing agency, and as Mr. Jeremiah rightfully stated, that all of the AI tools that I use, one of them kind of took the job of a virtual assistant. Someone would have been paid, but now I have an AI tool that does a lot of that for me. So again, pushing my educators out there to find some way to get artificial intelligence and integrate it into your teaching styles to try and make life a lot easier for yourself as well as your students out there. But it was a pleasure being here again, and it's always a pleasure to come and speak and share my thoughts.
It's and I believe me, I would be asking you to return in short order, but we will talk about this offline. My fellow, what house were you in PBC, by the way? Please don't say Aquinian.
Dominican.
Well, there you go. That's the good answer, right? That's the right answer, because I was in Dominican house. That's the best house. The best house. I don't care what the other fellas say.
We should have some preparation for that before the show.
All right, Mr. Jeremiah, over to you, sir, for some closing comments. The students in CXC, they're right now in the throes of completing their exams, and of course, this is a very busy time for you as well. So I appreciate the time that you've taken today to appear on the program. But over to you for some closing comments, sir.
Well, first of all, Dr. Bubb, I want to express my gratitude for inviting me to be on the show, and I think my presence here was augmented even more with the presence of our dear brother, Mr. Handel. Very, very impressed. Continue to be impressed with him, and I certainly want to wish him all the best with his new responsibilities. Professor Hilary Beckles once said that we have certain institutions in the region that sometimes we don't treasure enough. We know West Indies cricket is one of those institutions that bring us together. Another of those institutions that bring us together and we rely heavily on is CXC. Sometimes we have negative things to say, sometimes we have positive things to say, but the reality is that CXC continues to serve the interests of the region, and for that we are deeply appreciative. CXC did make a lot of accommodation during the pandemic to ensure that our students and the constituencies across the region were well served, by making accommodations at great sacrifices and costs to all of us across the region. So we want to thank them for that. I want to emphasize that in order for CXC to succeed, CXC depends heavily on the integrity of professionals across the region. The truth is that most of the professionals who work in ministries of education and in schools and in institutions of higher learning across the region are men and women of great integrity. But every once in a while, the focus is on the one who may have chosen not to follow the rules and not to follow the guidance that is provided by ministries of education and CXC. And when someone does that, their choice can have a negative effect on what we treasure in the Caribbean as the Caribbean Examination Council and those exams, a suite of exams that they provide. So the onus is on all of us to exercise our responsibilities well, to be men and women of integrity when we do our work, and that we keep in mind that the greater good of protecting and developing this Caribbean civilization is all of our responsibility. AI is here to stay. Let us be open to the ways in which we can continue to learn and grow and develop. And I have a particular interest because this Caribbean region really needs as many persons as possible to understand the positives, the negatives, the opportunities that may be available to us through AI. But that requires openness, and that requires a collective dialogue that has to continue at every level across the region. So blessings to all our listeners, and thank you, Dr. Bubb, for having me.
Absolutely, Mr. Jeremiah, Mr. Andel, thank you all so much. Let's thank Mr. Gill, a previous guest, as well as Dr. Campbell out there in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Viewers and listeners, again, we want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Bubb Report. This was a very interesting and important conversation there on what's happening around the Caribbean Examinations Council, but looking at the ways in which digital innovation is continuing to affect learning in the Caribbean as a development imperative. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report. We thank you again for tuning in. Have a safe week, everyone, and we will see you next week for another installment of the Bubb Report. Bye-bye.